With a lot of legal efforts targeting CCW laws in California, today we're going to take a closer look at CRPA versus the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, holding them accountable for how and when they're issuing CCW permits. Let's talk about it. Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel today. That's right, we are taking a step back to look deeper into the lawsuit CRPA versus the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. I feel like it's been mentioned here and there in videos, but we haven't done a specific video on it. So we're going to do that today. To walk us through it, we have brought back on volunteer president of CRPA. That is Chuck Michelle. Chuck, thanks for being with us today.
Always a pleasure, fellas. Thanks for having me and helping us get the word out.
Absolutely. But before we get into that, guys, if you want to directly contribute to Second Amendment litigation just like this or legislative efforts, please be sure and like, share, and subscribe to these videos. Hit that notification bell so that when these videos drop, you are the first to see it. It's going to go directly to your profile so that you can then share with others this information that can ultimately be taken to the ballot box in November for the general elections. So, Chuck, let's just kind of dive right on in here. I did want to start just by reading the second paragraph of the introduction of the lawsuit, just so that we could kind of frame the conversation here. And it reads like this. The main policies that plaintiffs target here are 1, defendants' failure to timely process carry permit applications. 2, the grossly excessive fees defendants are charging to process permit applications and satisfy various permit requirements. 3, the use of highly subjective suitability criteria in evaluating applicants. And 4, the refusal to honor permits issued by other states. These practices and policies, some of which are enabled by state law, violate the Second and 14th Amendment. So, I mean, having that sort of as the criteria, could you just sort of give us the brief background? What led up to this lawsuit? What are we seeing in these 4 specific areas that make this a lawsuit worth having in LA County?
Sure. Well, keep in mind preliminarily, Bruin came down from the Supreme Court in June 2022, and it said you cannot require a special need to get a concealed carry permit. In California, jurisdictions that didn't want to issue CCWs hid behind the good cause requirement, which they interpreted to mean that you had to have some special need beyond what the general public had, a need for self-defense or to defend your families. You had to basically have a death threat to qualify as having good cause in a lot of jurisdictions, and LA County Sheriff was one of them for many years. So CRPA launched the CCW Reckoning program, where we went county by county, city by city, sent them everyone a letter saying, here's what your obligations are now under Bruin. You need to start issuing. And many jurisdictions did, and they are. In fact, even San Francisco has issued permits and has a number of permits going through the process. But what some jurisdictions didn't do was get enough manpower, enough administrative support to process applications quickly. So quickly enough. Now, it used to be they had 90 days under state law. Then they amended the state law to give counties 120 or issuing authorities 120 days. They've run into some snags because they don't have enough people to process them in some jurisdictions. LA County was chief among them. And that's not surprising, frankly, because LA County is the largest county in the country, in the state, and it's going to have the most applicants. But that's no excuse. The state set up this permitting system, and if the permitting system is impossible to comply with, that's not the problem of the people who are applying for licenses. It's the problem of the agency that needs to dedicate more resources to grant people their fundamental right to get a permit so they can carry, as the Second Amendment allows them to do. So as we worked city by city, county by county throughout the state, LA County became obviously the worst offender because it was taking 18 months, and it's still taking that long in many instances, to process CCW applications. Well, that's far too long. And so we sued them after we tried to work with these jurisdictions as much as we could to we understand there is some adjustment that needs to be made and staffing adjustments and finance adjustments. But at a certain point, we said enough's enough. We can't let you get away with this any longer, and sued LA County Sheriff. Now, in addition to LA County Sheriff, we sued the city of Laverne because Laverne is charging $1,000 to apply for a permit. And remember, these permits right now, they're only good for 2 years. So the renewal is going to be unreasonably high, unconstitutionally high too, the price. So we're challenging the high price, we're challenging the long delay. And then on top of all that, we're also challenging the fact that you can't get a non-resident permit in California and that the state does not honor out-of-state licenses to carry. That's why we sued the County of Los Angeles, the LA County Sheriff, the City of Laverne, and the California Department of Justice. Because sometimes the DOJ doesn't have enough manpower to process applications, to process the background checks that the state has to do for each of these local issuing authorities to make sure that the person who's applying for the license is not prohibited from possessing firearms. So all these entities are dragging their feet or charging too much, and we have to put a stop to it.
So, I mean, you have kind of a lot of different battlefronts for the right to carry as far as what the state is trying to impose. You know, you've got the emergency regulations kind of attacking the requirements for trainers for CCW training. You have this portion which kind of attacks the issuance of CCWs. You've also got the Senate Bill 2 sensitive places requirements, which feeds into how and where people can carry. So if they're all fitting into a puzzle piece like this, you know, you've got Senate Bill 2. Attorney General Bonta is leading up the legal defense on that one. You would expect, you know, as far as a law like that, this isn't necessarily a law insofar as it's the sheriff's department that's creating these criteria. Why is it the reciprocity piece specifically that Attorney General Bonta gets named as a defendant in this lawsuit?
Yes, that's part of the reason, because it's the state attorney general's office, the state itself is a defendant because it doesn't process background checks fast enough for CCW applicants, and because it needs to know that the law is that you can't, someone's Second Amendment rights don't end at the moment they cross the border into California. If they have a permit from another state, or if then that permit should either be honored or California has to make non-resident permits available, and they haven't been done either. So suing the Department of Justice should correct that. If they still try and drag their feet and say it only applies in LA County, well, if we have legal precedent from the court that says you can't take this long, then and another jurisdiction is still taking that long, we'll just have to file another lawsuit against the other jurisdiction. But I think what's going to happen here, what should happen here, is the county is going to be forced to dedicate more resources to process applications more quickly. At the most 120 days. We don't think that's even a reasonable amount of time to get a permit, but that's what the state law says right now. But we're challenging that too. It shouldn't take that long. You should be able to get a permit within 30 days, if that. And so the reality is that the sheriff's department is not incentivized to put enough manpower on this, that it needs the amount of manpower on it that it needs to be able to process these applications quickly. And it's not our problem. It's not the problem of an applicant that the state has set up this cumbersome system that requires all these background checks and in some cases psychological exams and some of these subjective criteria that takes longer to approve an application. That's not our problem. If the state wants to set up that licensing system and it costs a lot of money to implement it, that's the state's problem. The state has to spend the money to implement the system and get the applications processed for a small fee and in a short time.
So the challenge is essentially localized to the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. Would the results of a favorable opinion in our favor also be localized in this situation? You know, you might have an area like in the Bay Area, there could be a county that doesn't necessarily have excessive fees or excessive wait times, but they are forcing people to go through a psychological examination. Or maybe in another area like San Diego, where the fees might not be that high. There's no criteria like a psychological examination, but the wait time is over a year. What are the overall implications of a good decision in a lawsuit like this?
Well, this should be legal precedent that forces all cities to issue quickly and not charge too much, and also not require some kind of subjective criteria before someone can qualify for a license. Remember, you were talking about the SB2 issues before. There's two parts to this. There's applying for the license, the process of being approved for the license, then getting the license, the CCW, the license to carry. Then once you have the license to carry, what does that license allow you to do? SB2 was targeted the people who already have licenses and said, well, that license isn't good in most of these places because we've deemed those places to be sensitive, where all handguns can be banned even if you have a license. Never mind that for 100 years, CCW holders have been able to take their firearms into most public places. And hasn't been a problem for 100 years. That's the way it's been. But they don't like the fact, they want to discourage the legislators in Sacramento, led by Gavin Newsom, want to discourage people from applying for a license in any way they can. So if they make it too expensive, if they make it take too long, people will give up. Or if you get one and it's not good in enough places, people will say it's not worth it. It's all part of their plan to push back and resist Bruin. It really is underhanded, frankly, a way for the state and local jurisdictions that agree with the state's philosophy to limit the number of licenses to carry in California. And we want to do exactly the opposite. I think there's close to 350,000 permits now. There used to be about 200 before Bruin came down. There should be several million in the state of California. And since LA County is the largest county in the state, there could be a million or 500,000 in LA County alone, and that's the way it ought to be.
Yeah, it's definitely seems like a quagmire of the leftists who want to eradicate firearms in California, because you have this community where there just aren't really that many problems. The identity politics definitely contradict it. So yeah, it seems like where the effort needs to get put in is just to deter people from getting licenses at all costs in several different ways. Any final thoughts on this, Chuck? I know it's hard to tell what the courts are going to do, what the timelines are going to be. What are your thoughts on this lawsuit going forward?
Well, there's a general theme in all these lawsuits, and that is that the lawyers, frankly, for Michael Bloomberg that work for Everytown Law, his basically his law firm, come up with some very creative ways to try and get around Bruin. And we know that the DOJ is having telephone conferences with Everytown lawyers and all the gun ban lobby groups regularly to try and come up with ways to frustrate Bruin, either by doing through the back door what they can't do through the front door anymore, or by, frankly, trying to convince courts to misread Bruin and misapply Bruin. So there's a bigger fight going on here that kind of covers all the litigation, all the cases we have. We have over a dozen cases now just in California challenging ammunition background checks, magazine capacity bans, semi-auto bans, the sensitive places law. There's some I'm not even occurring to me right now, but we have dozens of cases, and the bigger fight is over how Bruin applies and what it stops the state from being able to do when it comes to limiting your right to keep and bear arms. So that's the biggest battle. And that's being fought, frankly, in the Ninth Circuit in the Duncan case right now. We had our en banc oral argument in that case a few weeks ago. And there's a number of cases that we've asked the Supreme Court to take because the Supreme Court really needs to step in again and stop the courts from being able to play these shenanigans with misinterpreting Bruin, misapplying it so that they can uphold gun control laws that are not constitutional. But in terms of CCWs, if you haven't applied, go apply for one. If you're hitting problems in the process, let CRPA know, and we'll check in on them. A lot of these counties, frankly, just don't understand what, or didn't at least, I think we've educated most of them, understand what their responsibilities are now under Bruin. And again, a manpower shortage is not an excuse for delaying the applicant from getting that license that they need to defend themselves and their families.
Well, yeah, there certainly is no shortage of litigative and legislative efforts to follow along with. We are certainly going to follow along with this one, that is CRPA versus the LA County Sheriff's Department. Chuck, I want to thank you. I know that you're a busy guy. I want to thank you for coming on and spending this time with us.
My pleasure, guys.
Absolutely. And guys, if you like videos and content like this, if you want to continue and directly contribute to CRPA's litigative and legislative efforts for progressing the Second Amendment in California, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe to these videos. Hit that notification bell so that as these videos drop, they go directly to you for that knowledge gained. So I want to thanks, guys, and we'll see you on the next one.